When we speak of Henry VIII's wives, certain names come to mind: the doomed Anne Boleyn, the faithful Catherine of Aragon, the tragic Catherine Howard. Their stories are marked by passion, betrayal, blood, and scandal. But lurking in the shadows of Tudor history is a woman whose story is not one of tragic romance or political downfall, but of survival. A foreign princess cast into the heart of the most perilous court in Europe. A bride unwanted by her husband, scorned before their wedding night. And yet, through quiet wit and extraordinary instinct, she managed what no other wife of Henry VIII could. She left the marriage with her head intact, her fortune secured, and her dignity untouched. This is the astonishing little-told tale of Anne of Cleves, the queen who would not be destroyed, and the only wife clever enough to escape the wrath of a tyrant. Anne was born on September 22nd, 1515, in Dusseldorf, part of the small but strategically valuable Duchy of Cleves. She was the daughter of John III, Duke of Cleves, and Maria of Jülich-Bur. Raised in a conservative religious household, Anne was not schooled in music, dance, or languages, as was fashionable in other European courts. Instead, she learned domestic skills, household management, and piety. Her family played a crucial role within the Protestant League of Germany, a collective of princes resisting the Catholic Habsburgs and Rome. This alliance made Cleves a valuable player on the European stage, its loyalty sought after by larger kingdoms desperate to shift the balance of power. Anne, born into this volatile world of alliances and betrayals, would soon find herself a pawn in the deadliest Game of Thrones Tudor England had ever seen. When Henry VIII split from the Catholic Church and declared himself head of the Church of England, he found himself isolated, excommunicated by the Pope and threatened by Catholic monarchies. Henry urgently sought Protestant allies. And what better way to cement alliances than through marriage? The seemingly unremarkable girl from Cleves would soon become England's unlikely queen. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's shrewd and calculating chief minister, was the architect of Anne's English fate. After the tragic death of Jane Seymour in childbirth, Henry's court was gripped by uncertainty. The aging monarch needed a fourth wife, not only for the prospect of more heirs, but for political survival. Europe was a powder keg. Catholic forces threatened England from both France and the Holy Roman Empire. Protestant alliances were scarce. Cromwell saw an opportunity in Cleves. The duchy's Protestant credentials and opposition to the Habsburgs made it an appealing partner. Cromwell scouted various European courts for potential brides, but politics pointed him firmly to Cleves. Negotiations commenced in secret dispatches and coded letters. Yet, Henry was a man driven by desire as much as diplomacy. To seal the deal, Cromwell dispatched Hans Holbein the Younger, the king's favoured artist, to paint Anne's likeness. The result was a portrait of an elegant, serene woman clad in rich fabrics, with delicate features and a modest smile. The king was entranced. Based solely on Holbein's artwork and the promise of a strong alliance, Henry agreed to marry her. The marriage treaty was signed in October 1539. England braced for the arrival of a new queen, and the kingdom's most fateful courtship began. New Year's Day, 1540. The wind howled along the banks of the Thames. Anne had finally arrived in England, her ship docking at Deal after a perilous winter voyage. As she travelled toward London, Henry, filled with romantic excitement, devised a dramatic plan to surprise his bride, a courtly custom of chivalric times. Dressed in disguise, the corpulent and aging king stormed into Rochester Castle, eager to sweep his future wife off her feet. In this romantic fantasy, she would instantly recognize her noble suitor, fall to her knees in adoration, and England's new queen would be forever smitten. But the script didn't go as planned. When the cloaked figure burst into her rooms, Anne, unfamiliar with English customs and unaware of the stranger's identity, did not swoon. Accounts suggest she barely reacted, offering polite confusion instead of infatuation. Some chroniclers whisper that she even recoiled, shocked by the strange man's intrusive manner. Henry felt humiliated. In a court obsessed with status, appearances, and honour, such a slight, even unintended, was unthinkable. From that moment, his ardour turned to disdain. To his courtiers, he grumbled that Anne was no beauty, referring to her cruelly as a Flanders mare. Yet, with a marriage treaty signed and political necessity demanding it, the wedding had to proceed. Behind closed doors, Thomas Cromwell's heart must have sunk. The man who'd orchestrated the match now saw his fortunes crumble before his eyes. The first encounter between Henry and Anne would become one of Tudor history's most infamous miscalculations. On January 6, 1540, Greenwich Palace shimmered with pageantry. Tapestries of crimson and gold lined the walls, musicians tuned their lutes, and nobles in ermine-trimmed cloaks whispered nervously. For all its splendour, there was a palpable chill in the air. Anne of Cleves was to be Queen of England, but the bride's face betrayed none of the triumph one might expect. She barely knew the language, the customs, or the man she was about to wed, a man whose disappointment she had already sensed. Henry, for his part, approached the altar with a heart heavy with reluctance. His pride wounded by their disastrous first meeting, he now faced a public obligation he could neither escape nor endure with grace. The ceremony unfolded with solemn dignity. Anne wore a gown of rich cloth of gold, a jewelled headpiece gleaming above her pale brow. But behind the pageantry lurked the knowledge that this union was doomed before it even began. That night, the royal wedding chamber was prepared, fresh rushes laid, candles lit, and goblets of wine waiting. But what happened behind those heavy oak doors would seal Anne's fate. By dawn, Henry's displeasure had turned to fury. He confided in his most trusted courtiers. "I liked her before not well, but now I like her much worse." He claimed the Queen's body was not to his taste, alleging that her breasts sagged, her breath was foul, and that she had loose skin. He told Cromwell, whether truthfully or to mask his own impotence, that he could not consummate the marriage. And in Tudor England, a marriage unconsummated was a marriage unmade. But even more dangerous was the risk this posed to Thomas Cromwell. The man who had arranged this debacle would pay dearly. Henry's dissatisfaction wasn't simply personal. It was political dynamite. Thomas Cromwell had risen higher than any man of common birth in English history. He had tamed the monasteries, toppled queens, and reshaped the very faith of a nation. But now, his fate hung by a thread. Anne of Cleves had become a living liability. Henry's anger seethed. The king refused to share her bed, refused to treat her with warmth, and refused to honour the alliance she represented. Cromwell, desperate to placate his sovereign, sought a legal solution. And soon whispers of Anne's supposed prior betrothal surfaced. Rumours claimed she had once been promised to Francis of Lorraine, a political match now dissolved, but Henry seized upon it eagerly. If Anne had been pre-contracted, then her marriage to Henry was invalid. By June 1540, legal inquiries began. Cromwell, once untouchable, found his influence crumbling. And Anne, she must have known the danger. After all, this was the same court where queens lost heads, where accusations came like lightning, and where a fall from favour often meant a scaffold at dawn. But here lies Anne's brilliance. When the inquiry summoned her, Anne offered no protest. She declared that she consented to whatever pleased the king. She admitted the marriage had never been consummated. She confirmed the rumours of a past engagement. In doing so, she offered Henry an escape route and secured her own. On July 9, 1540, the marriage was officially annulled. The same day, Parliament passed a bill condemning Thomas Cromwell for treason. Within days, the once mighty minister would lose his head upon Tower Hill. But Anne, she was rewarded. Henry, grateful for her compliance, granted her generous estates, including Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, the former home of Anne Boleyn. She received an income befitting a princess and was styled henceforth as the king's beloved sister. Anne had done what none of Henry's wives before or after would manage. She turned rejection into advantage. She had survived the most dangerous man in England and gained a lifetime of wealth, safety, and status in return. Anne of Cleves may have lost a crown, but she gained something far more valuable in Tudor England: her life. Unlike Catherine of Aragon, she did not defy. Unlike Anne Boleyn, she did not intrigue. And unlike Catherine Howard, she did not play with fire. Anne understood the peril of Henry's court and, in a single masterful act of submission, rewrote her destiny. The annulment decree granted Anne the title King's Sister, an honorific without precedent. It gave her precedence over every woman in England save for Henry's current wife and daughters. And with it came an income so vast it rivaled that of many noble houses. She was awarded Richmond Palace on the Thames, Hever Castle in Kent, and generous country manors. Anne received a wardrobe of jewels and silks fit for a queen, and never again would she be asked to share a bed with a dangerous, volatile husband. Henry, perhaps feeling guilty, perhaps relieved, went out of his way to treat Anne well. She was invited to court for banquets, tournaments, and masques. When new wives arrived, Catherine Howard, then Catherine Parr, Anne was present to offer civil courtesies. Behind her public face, Anne must have watched those younger queens with keen, knowing eyes. She had been to the edge of ruin and survived, and she must have known that few others would be so fortunate. Even the king himself came to regard her fondly. He sent her New Year's gifts, called her my sister, and spoke of her with rare tenderness. In an age when queens were disposable, Anne of Cleves had played the game, and won. Freed from the shadow of Henry's volatile affections, Anne embraced her new life with shrewd contentment. She became a quiet fixture in English noble society, a woman of independent means, removed from the deadly intrigues of court, yet still close enough to witness history's turning wheel. She formed a special bond with Princess Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, perhaps understanding better than anyone what it meant to navigate a father's favour. Anne sent Elizabeth small gifts and maintained a cordial friendship that would endure through turbulent times. When Queen Catherine Howard fell, executed for adultery in 1542, Anne was discreetly relieved. And when Henry married Catherine Parr, the sixth and final queen, Anne welcomed her with grace. She remained Protestant at heart, though careful not to provoke during Queen Mary's Catholic reign. Anne even attended Mary's coronation in 1553, seated in a place of honour alongside the noblest ladies of the land. Unlike Henry's other discarded wives, Anne never remarried. She never plotted a return to the throne, nor sought foreign protection. Instead, she tended her gardens, managed her estates, and hosted English gentry with the elegance of a born princess. In an era where women's lives were often dictated by marriage contracts, Anne chose autonomy. She dined when she pleased, travelled where she wished, and, in her Kentish castles, lived a life of peaceful dignity. Anne of Cleves had stepped away from danger and found something Henry VIII could never offer her: freedom. Time, that ruthless judge of queens and kings, finally came for Anne of Cleves. In the summer of 1557, at the age of 41, Anne fell gravely ill. She had long enjoyed robust health, a rarity among Henry's wives, but, as the heat of July settled over Chelsea Old Manor, her strength faded. Though England was now ruled by Queen Mary I, Anne remained a respected figure. Mary, perhaps recalling the quiet kindness Anne had once shown her, ordered that her former stepmother be tended to with dignity. On July 16, 1557, Anne of Cleves passed away quietly in her bed, far from the dangerous intrigues of the Tudor court. And here, in her final moments, lay a quiet irony. She was the only one of Henry's 6 wives to be buried at Westminster Abbey, the ancient resting place of English monarchs. The tomb she was given is modest by royal standards, a simple stone near the high altar marked with her crowned initials and a Latin inscription. No elaborate effigy, no towering monument, just her name, forever etched in the sacred stones of England's greatest church. But perhaps this was fitting. Anne had never sought to dazzle or seduce. She had never fought for power or plotted revenge. She had survived where others perished, not by force or cunning, but by wisdom, grace, and a rare gift for knowing when to let go. Today, her tomb is often overlooked by tourists hurrying to glimpse the monuments of monarchs and statesmen. But for those who pause, it tells a story no grand statue ever could. The story of a woman who outlived scandal, navigated danger, and secured peace in a world that offered precious little of it to women like her. A queen without a crown, a wife without a wedding night, a survivor in an age of casualties. Though dismissed by some Tudor chroniclers as plain or inconsequential, modern historians recognise Anne of Cleves as a remarkable figure, one who turned a royal rejection into a personal triumph. She remains, centuries later, a testament to the idea that sometimes the greatest victories are not those won in battle or court, but those claimed quietly in survival. Anne of Cleves may not be England's most famous queen, but she is perhaps its wisest. The queen who lived,